When you grow up in a small Georgia town, silence is as thick as the summer heat. It hums through the trees, sits heavy on front porches, and creeps into every Sunday dinner. Mama used to say, "Baby, the Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen more than you speak." But now that I'm older, I wonder if that was her way of telling me to keep quiet about things that hurt too much to name. The day I found the silver locket, I was packing up Mama's room. She'd been gone 3 months, but her perfume, that old magnolia and rosewater scent, still lingered in the air. Every drawer I opened felt like turning a page of her that I didn't want to read. Then at the back of her vanity, behind a cracked hand mirror, I found it, a tarnished locket, cool and delicate, shaped like a heart but missing its chain. I opened it, expecting a picture of Daddy or maybe one of us kids, but instead, it was a photograph of a woman I didn't recognize. Her face was half in shadow, her smile small and secretive, and on the back of the picture, written in Mama's handwriting, were 4 words that stopped my breath. "Forgive me, my sister." I sat there, the house groaning around me in the quiet, that locket burning in my palm like a truth long denied. My mother had never mentioned a sister. Not once. By the time I stood up, my knees were trembling. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of sweet tea, and sat by the window, the one that faced the old pecan tree where Mama used to hang laundry. The sunlight filtered through the lace curtain, dust motes dancing like memories I couldn't yet place. I started calling around that afternoon, Aunt Laverne first, then Cousin Clara, but everyone went suddenly quiet when I asked about a sister. Clara said softly, "Now, baby, some things just best left alone." And that's when I knew. Whatever Mama hid, it was big enough to make even the women who loved her most afraid to speak. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the locket under my pillow like a secret of my own. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face, her half smile, her knowing eyes, and I wondered if she looked like me. By morning, I'd made up my mind. If Mama had a sister, I'd find her. Not because I wanted to expose old wounds, but because silence, that thick, sticky Georgia silence, had taken enough from us already. So I packed Mama's old Buick, slipped the locket round my neck, and headed toward the only clue I had, a return address written faintly on the back of the photograph, Savannah, Georgia, 1979. I didn't know it then, but that road would take me straight into the heart of everything Mama had spent her life trying to hide. A story of love, betrayal, and sacrifice that began long before I was born. And by the time I reached Savannah, I'd realized that sometimes the people who stay silent do so not to protect themselves, but to protect you. The drive from Willow Creek to Savannah took just under 4 hours, but it felt like a lifetime unspooling behind the wheel. The old Buick rattled like a tin can. The radio crackled through gospel and blues, and the sun burnt low over the cotton fields as I followed Highway 25 south. Every mile marker felt like a heartbeat, steady, deliberate, leading me closer to the truth. Mama always said Savannah was a city that remembers. And Lord, she was right. Even before I reached downtown, the air felt heavier, like history itself was hanging from the moss-draped oaks. The houses stood proud and tired all at once, their paint peeling, shutters cracked, but still holding on to beauty. I parked outside a narrow brick house on East Henry Street, the address written on the back of that faded photograph. My hands trembled on the steering wheel before I finally stepped out. The air smelled of salt and honeysuckle, and somewhere nearby, someone was frying catfish. The porch creaked when I climbed it, and before I could knock, the door opened. A woman, older, light brown skin with sharp gray eyes and a head full of silver curls, looked at me like she'd been expecting me. "You must be Naomi's girl," she said. The world tilted. Naomi, Mama's name. "Yes, ma'am," I managed, my voice barely more than a whisper. She nodded slowly, stepping aside. "Then you better come in. We've been waiting a long time for you." Her house smelled of lemon polish and something sweet baking, maybe peach cobbler. Every inch of the place was filled with memories, framed photographs, crocheted doilies, and an old upright piano near the window. But it wasn't the homey comfort that struck me most. It was the silence, that same silence I'd known my whole life, just heavier here, like it had settled into the walls. "I'm Ruth," she said, motioning for me to sit. "Your mama's sister." My breath caught. "Mama never told me." "I know," Ruth sighed, folding her hands. "She wouldn't." The words hung between us like dust in the afternoon light. I didn't know what to ask first, but the look in her eyes told me everything. Regret, pain, and something else I couldn't yet name. "I reckon you found that locket," she said quietly. I nodded. "That belonged to me once. Your mama took it the night she left." I frowned. "The night she left where?" Ruth stood, moving slowly toward the piano. She ran her fingers across the dusty keys, pressing one that let out a single lonely note. "The night she left this house and left me to face the storm alone." She turned, and I saw the wet shimmer in her eyes. "Naomi and we loved the same man once. He was my fiancé first." The room shrunk. "She took him?" Ruth shook her head. "No, he chose her, and she couldn't live with the guilt. So she ran, carried his child, and swore never to look back." My heart stopped. "His child?" Ruth looked at me long and hard. "You, baby. You're the reason your mama left." The air left my lungs in a rush, and the room swam before my eyes. It wasn't just a family secret. It was a betrayal woven into my very blood. Ruth came closer, her voice gentler now. "Don't you misunderstand me. Your mama loved you more than life itself. But love don't wash away what's been done. And sometimes silence is the only way a soul can keep from breaking." She reached out, placing the locket back in my hand. "That picture inside, that's me, before everything changed." I couldn't speak, barely could breathe. Outside, thunder rolled low over the horizon, the promise of rain or reckoning. And in that heavy savannah twilight, I realized I had crossed more than just miles. I had stepped straight into the ghost of my mother's sin. The rain came that night like it had been waiting years to fall. It started as a whisper against the old windows, then grew into a pounding that made the whole house tremble. Aunt Ruth lit candles when the power flickered out, their golden glow dancing across the framed faces of people I didn't recognize, faces that now felt like strangers and blood at the same time. I sat on the edge of the couch, that locket still clutched in my palm. The photograph inside of Ruth smiling in a white summer dress, sunlight tangled in her curls, seemed to mock the silence between us. She sat across the room, her silhouette framed in candlelight, eyes distant but sharp as a blade. "Why now?" I finally asked, my voice small beneath the rain. "Why tell me this after all these years?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she rose from her chair and disappeared into the hallway. When she returned, she carried a small tin box. Its metal was rusted and dented, the lid tied shut with a faded red ribbon. She placed it on the table between us with a soft thud. "These," she said, "belong to your mama. She left them behind." I hesitated, running my fingers over the cold tin. "What's in it?" She said, "Letters, dozens of them, to me, to him, to you before you were born." My throat tightened. "Why didn't you ever send them?" Her eyes glistened with something sharp and heavy, remorse maybe, because I thought she didn't deserve forgiveness, and I sure wasn't ready to give it. Lightning flashed outside, throwing her face into a stark relief, every line etched deep by time and guilt. "She wrote those letters after she left," Ruth continued, voice trembling now. "She wanted you to know the truth one day, but I couldn't bear it. I buried that box under the porch, thought maybe if I hid it, the pain would stay buried too." I looked at her, stunned. "You buried her words?" She nodded slowly. "Until last week. I don't know why, but something told me it was time. Maybe God finally got tired of watching me hold on to what wasn't mine to keep." I untied the ribbon with shaking hands. Inside, the box smelled faintly of cedar and earth. The envelopes were yellowed, edges curled from age. I picked up one and traced my mother's lupin handwriting. "Ruthie," it began. The sound of her name written by Mama's hand hit me like thunder. Ruth's voice cracked softly. "I haven't read them all. Couldn't. Some things are too heavy to carry twice." I opened the first letter carefully, the paper thin and trembling like it had been waiting decades to breathe. "Ruthie, I never meant to steal anything from you, least of all love. I thought I could outrun the shame, but I see now that running only passed the hurt on to my child. I pray one day she'll find her way home to you. I read the words over and over until my tears blurred the ink. When I looked up, Ruth was watching me with the same pain in her eyes that I'd seen in my own reflection all my life. She loved you, I whispered. Ruth nodded faintly, and I loved her. That's the cruelest part. Betrayal don't always come from hate. Sometimes it's born from love that can't find its place. The storm outside swelled, wind rattled in the windows like ghosts begging to come in. For the first time, I saw my family's history not as a straight line, but as a circle, pain handed down, silence wrapping us tight, love trying to break through. As the candles flickered low, I realized the truth wasn't just about who betrayed who. It was about what we all lost by never speaking. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because if the letters had waited this long to be found, there had to be something in them the past wasn't ready to let go of. The storm had quieted by morning, leaving behind that strange stillness that feels almost sacred. The air outside smelled of wet soil and magnolia. The world washed clean. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's handwriting floating in candlelight, her words echoing through the dark corners of my heart. Aunt Ruth was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, wearing a soft blue robe and humming under her breath. The tune was familiar, an old gospel melody Mama used to hum when she cooked breakfast on Sundays. I froze in the doorway, realizing for the first time how alike they were. "You didn't rest," she said gently without turning around. "Couldn't," I admitted. She poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one toward me. "Then maybe you'll rest easier once you've read what she left for you." She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a single unopened envelope, thicker than the rest. My name was written across it in a careful, trembling hand. "To my daughter, when you're ready." My heart stuttered. "How long have you had this?" "Since the day she left," Ruth said. "She gave it to me herself, told me to hold it till you came looking. I didn't think you ever would." I sat down hard, the wooden chair creaking beneath me. The edges of the envelope were worn, as if it had been handled 100 times by someone afraid to let go. "Why now, Ruth?" I asked softly. She sighed, her voice rough as gravel. "Because I'm tired of carrying ghosts, baby. I want you to have what's yours, the truth. Even if it hurts." My fingers shook as I tore the flap open. Inside was a folded letter and a photograph, Mama holding a newborn wrapped in a yellow blanket. Her face was soft, but tired, her smile shadowed by something I couldn't name. The letter began in her familiar looping cursive, "My sweet Olivia, if you're reading this, then Ruth did right by you after all. I know what I did can't be undone. I left not because I stopped loving you, but because I was scared my mistakes would define your life before you had the chance to live it." My breath caught as the next line unraveled everything I thought I knew. "You were born not out of sin, but out of forgiveness. Ruth's husband, Joseph, he wasn't just the man who raised you, he was your father. In every way that mattered." I dropped the paper. My chest felt like it was splitting open. "No!" Ruth closed her eyes. "I hoped you never had to carry that truth. But I reckoned it's time." My voice cracked. "You mean Mama and Uncle Joe?" Her silence was enough. I stood, pacing the kitchen, anger and sorrow twisting through me like wildfire. "You all lied to me. My whole life. I thought she abandoned me. And you just watched me hate her for it?" Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "Because I hated her too. And that hate blinded me to what you needed most. The truth. We both let it fester too long." I turned toward the window, the rain dripping softly from the porch roof. "So I'm the secret. I'm the reason everything broke?" Ruth stood behind me, her voice low and trembling. "No, baby. You're the reason it can be made whole again." I wanted to believe her, but my heart felt like glass, cracked, glittering with all the pieces of a life I didn't understand anymore. The morning light spilled across the kitchen, touching the photograph on the table, Mama's arms cradling me, the same way I now held her words. Some part of me knew this moment wasn't meant to destroy me. It was meant to free me. But freedom, I was learning, came with its own kind of ache. That letter sat on my lap for hours, its words rippling through me like thunder that wouldn't fade. I must have read it 20 times, tracing my mother's looping cursive with trembling fingers. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and rosewater, the scent of her old church dresses. Each breath I took felt heavier than the last, weighted with truths I hadn't asked for. By the time Aunt Ruth found me again, the sky outside had turned gray. The afternoon light was soft and merciful, the kind that makes you feel like the world is trying to apologize. She didn't say a word at first, just brought me a plate of fried catfish and cornbread, placed it gently in front of me, and sat down across the table. I didn't touch it. I was staring at the photograph. "She kept that picture hidden," Ruth said after a moment. "Said she wanted you to have it when you were strong enough." I looked up at her, my throat tight. Strong enough for what? To hate her? To hate you? Ruth's eyes shimmered. No, strong enough to understand her. For a long time, we sat in the hum of the old house, the creaking beams, the slow tick of the wall clock, the sigh of the wind slipping through the cracked window pane. The air felt full of the past, like every breath we took stirred ghosts from their sleep. Finally, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me he was my father?" She sighed. "Because Joseph loved you too much to risk losing you. He thought the truth would take him from him, that you'd see him as something shameful." My heart twisted. But he wasn't. None of this was my fault. No, baby, it wasn't. But your mama carried that guilt like a cross on her back. She thought leaving would spare you from the whispers. She thought I could protect you better than she could. I swallowed hard, tears slipping down my cheeks. Protect me from love? Because that's what she took away. Ruth reached across the table and took my hand, her skin warm and rough. "She loved you, Ollie, in her own broken way, and maybe it's time you forgive her, not for her sake, but for yours." I closed my eyes, letting the cool evening wind touch my face. "Maybe," I whispered, "but first, I have to forgive us." As the sun dipped low, I slipped the letter back into its envelope and placed it gently under the same floorboard. Only this time, it wasn't a hiding place. It was a resting place. The secrets were no longer mine to bury. They were mine to release. The night after reading Mama's letter, I dreamed of a train. It roared through a foggy Georgia field, sparks flying from its wheels like fireflies. And in the window, I saw her, my mother, waving at me with tears in her eyes. Only she wasn't the woman I remembered. Her hair was shorter, her eyes softer, and when she opened her mouth to speak, no sound came out, just the steady rhythm of the train wheels. "Forgive, forgive, forgive." I woke up to the sound of rain hitting the tin roof, the kind of rain that washes the world clean. Aunt Ruth was already up, brewing chicory coffee, humming an old hymn I half remembered from childhood. When she saw me, she smiled, but her eyes still carried that quiet worry, the kind that comes from watching the truth unravel in someone else's hands. "You didn't sleep much," she said, sliding a mug toward me. "Did you?" I asked. She chuckled softly. "Child, at my age, sleep don't visit as often as it used to." We sat at the table in silence, the coffee between us sending up thin wisps of steam. The rain tapped against the window like a steady heartbeat. After a while, I asked, "Where's Joseph buried?" Ruth's eyes lifted from her cup. "You sure you want to know?" "I need to see him." She nodded slowly. "Down by the river. There's a little church there, Mount Olive. He's in the back lot near the willow trees." By noon, the rain had stopped, and the air was thick and sweet, smelling of wet earth and honeysuckle. I drove down the dirt road in Mama's old Buick, the tires kicking up mud. The church was small, its white paint flaking, the cross at its steeple leaning just a little to the right, like it too carried the weight of the years. I found his grave beneath a weeping willow. The headstone was simple: Joseph Carter, 1948 to 1986, a good man who loved quietly. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the stone, the locket heavy around my neck. Then I knelt, pressing my fingers into the damp grass. I found out, I said softly, about you, about her, about everything. The wind moved gently through the willow branches, brushing my hair like a hand I'd always known. I wish you'd fought for her. I wish she'd stayed. I wish somebody had told me the truth before it broke me. A bird called out somewhere in the distance, and for a moment I thought about all the times I'd seen Mama sitting on that porch, quiet, distant, always staring at something I couldn't see. Maybe this was it, this place, this man, this secret. I took the locket from around my neck, opened it, and set it at the base of the headstone. You loved her, and she loved you, and maybe that's enough. I stayed until the sky turned lavender, until the mosquitoes began to hum, and the first stars blinked awake. Then I turned and walked back toward the car. Halfway down the road, I stopped and looked back. The willow branches swayed, brushing against the stone like forgiveness itself. As I drove back to Aunt Ruth's house, the sky cleared completely, and I swear, for a second, I saw the moon catch the silver edge of that locket one last time, a small quiet gleam before it disappeared into the night. That's when I realized something Mama had tried to teach me all along. Sometimes, silence isn't about hiding, it's about protecting the things we love most from being misunderstood. And for the first time in my life, I understood her silence, not as absence, but as love that survived even after she was gone. The next morning, I woke to the sound of hammering. Aunt Ruth was outside, nailing loose boards on the porch, her gray headscarf tied tight against the sun. The smell of sawdust and fresh coffee mixed in the air, and for the first time since I'd arrived, the house didn't feel heavy with ghosts. It felt alive, breathing again. I poured myself a cup and stepped out, barefoot on the worn planks. The wood felt warm under my soles, and I thought about all the stories buried beneath, the ones Mama never told, the ones Ruth tried to protect, the ones that had finally clawed their way to the surface. "You fixing it up?" I asked. "Mm-hmm," Ruth said, hammering another nail. "Porch been creaking since before you were born. Figure it's time to let it rest." Her words lingered. Let it rest. I watched her for a while. Her movements were slow but sure, each nail a quiet act of healing. I noticed how the boards she replaced were the same ones that had once hidden Mama's letters, the ones I'd found. That thought struck me like a gospel chord. "I think I need to tell my brother," I said finally, "about everything." Ruth paused mid-swing. "You sure that's wise? Some truths don't sit easy with everyone." "I know," I said, my voice steady, "but lies sit worse." She studied me, her eyes deep and unreadable, then nodded. "All right, baby, then do it with grace." That afternoon, I called him Marcus. He still lived in Atlanta, worked too much, talked too little. When he picked up, his voice was cautious, distant. "Liv, everything okay?" "I found something. About Mama." There was a long pause. "What kind of something?" "The kind that changes everything." He didn't say anything for a while, and I could almost hear the wall going up between us, brick by brick. Finally, he said, "I don't need to know. She did what she thought was right." I swallowed. "Don't you want to know who we are?" He said, "We're her children. That's enough for me." The call ended with that. No goodbye, just silence. The same silence that had raised us both. I sat on the porch steps afterward, staring at the road stretching into the horizon. Somewhere deep down, I knew Marcus wasn't ready. Maybe he never would be. Some people carry denial the way others carry hope, tight to the chest, never letting go. That night, Ruth and I sat under the porch light, a bowl of sliced peaches between us. The cicadas sang their steady hymn, and the air smelled of rain again. You did what you had to. Now let the rest be. I leaned back, feeling the hum of the porch beneath me, like it was remembering all that had seen. Laughter, arguments, tears whispered into the night. The same boards that once hid shame now held peace. The same wood that once groaned under secrets now carried forgiveness. And as the wind brushed through the pecan trees, I thought maybe that's what redemption really looks like. Not big gestures, not perfect endings, just the courage to face what's buried and let it breathe again. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of the house, the steady creak of old wood, the soft whistle through the screen door, and the echo of my mother's voice somewhere between the breeze and the stars, saying, "You can speak now, baby." The silence has done its job. It rained hard that night, the kind of southern rain that soaks through the earth and memory alike. Thunder rolled low across the hills, and lightning flashed against the magnolia tree out back, making its blossoms glow like ghostly lanterns. Aunt Ruth and I had lit candles when the power went out. Their flicker danced across her lined face, turning every wrinkle into a road map of time and truth. I sat at the table with the letters, Mama's handwriting hurling like vines across the pages. The paper was soft from age, stained with tears that weren't all mine. I kept reading, even when the words blurred. Ruth rocked quietly across from me. "You gonna read all of them tonight?" "I have to," I said. "Feels like she's still talking, like she never stopped." The rain beat against the tin roof, steady as a heartbeat. I turned to one of the last letters, one Mama had written to Ruth but never sent. "I didn't mean to raise my children in silence, Ruth. I just didn't know another way. The truth burned too bright, and I was afraid it'd burn them too." I pressed the page to my chest. I could almost hear her voice, soft, trembling, filled with regret and love in equal measure. Ruth sighed, her gaze fixed on the candle flame. She was always scared of her own fire, always thinking she had to protect everybody from it. "Maybe we all do that," I whispered. "Protect people from ourselves." Ruth nodded slowly, her earrings catching the light. "But fire don't care if you hide it. It finds a way to show itself, even if it takes years." A branch cracked outside, startling us both. I went to the porch, rain spraying my face. Through the storm, I saw something strange, small glows moving through the darkness. At first, I thought it was lightning bugs, but then I realized it was the neighbors, men, women, children, walking up the muddy road holding lanterns. I blinked, confused. "Aunt Ruth, there's people coming." She came to the doorway, her hand clutching her shawl. "Oh, Lord," she murmured, "I forgot. It's lantern night." "Was that?" "Started years ago," she said, her eyes misty. "Folks walked the road with light to honor the ones who carried burdens we never understood, the ones who kept families together when truth could have torn them apart." The people gathered at the edge of the yard, their faces lit gold by flame. They began to hum, low and mournful, the kind of hymn that crawled under your skin and stayed there. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I stepped off the porch, bare feet in the wet grass, rain dripping down my arms. The hymn rose, and I felt like Mama was among them, not as a ghost, but as memory made holy. When I looked back, Ruth was crying silently. She raised her lantern high, her face bathed in light and rain. I did the same. Together, we stood in the downpour, surrounded by voices, some living, some gone. And for the first time, I felt the weight of our story lift, carried away on thunder and song. Later, when the storm eased, Ruth whispered, "Your mama's peace been waiting for you to find it. You did good, Liv." I wanted to believe that, and for a fleeting second, as the last candle flickered out, I did. But deep inside, another truth stirred, one the letters hadn't told yet. There was still one voice missing, one that hadn't been heard, and I was ready to find it. The morning after the storm, the air was thick with that clean green smell that follows heavy rain. The magnolia trees shimmered in the light, every petal rinsed new. Aunt Ruth was already on the porch, sipping her coffee, wrapped in that old shawl of hers. She looked both exhausted and at peace, like the night had wrung something out of her that needed to leave. But my heart was still tangled. The letters were spread across the table inside, their edges curling like they were alive, breathing. Mama's words lingered in every corner of the house, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else's truth hadn't been told. I took a deep breath and walked over to Ruth. "Auntie, you said last night that Mama was scared of her own fire. Who taught her to be that way?" Ruth set her cup down slowly. "Lord, child, that's a heavy question for the morning. My throat tightened. I just want to understand. I keep feeling like there's something more." Ruth's eyes clouded. She turned her gaze toward the old oak fence. "There was your granddaddy, Elijah, man of pride and thunder. And your grandma Essie, my sister, she carried her pain quiet, same as your mama. But there was someone else lived, someone nobody ever talked about. I leaned forward, heart pounding. Who? Ruth hesitated. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her coffee, then put it down again. Your mama had a brother, older. Name was Daniel. The name fell like a stone into the silence between us. I blinked. Mama never said she couldn't, Ruth said, her voice trembling. Daniel left when he was 17, fought with your granddaddy over something big, something that split this family in two. He never came back. I stared at her. What happened? Ruth sighed. Essie took sides. Elijah said Daniel wasn't his blood, accused Essie of something wild, of stepping out with another man. It wasn't true, but that lie burned through this house like fire. Daniel left to protect his mama's name, but it cost him everything. Family, home, even his place in the story. My stomach twisted. So Mama grew up thinking her brother just abandoned her? Ruth nodded slowly. She never knew the truth. Your granddaddy made sure of that. The letters suddenly felt heavier than paper. They were pieces of a story stitched together with secrets and shame. I thought about the way Mama used to sit on the porch and stare down the road, as if waiting for someone to appear. Maybe she'd been waiting for Daniel all along. I need to find him, I whispered. Ruth's eyes widened. Liv, he be in his 70s now, if he's even still alive. I don't care, I have to try. Ruth's lips pressed tight. Then she nodded, her voice low. If you're going to dig up Ghost Girl, you best be ready for what they tell you. I went inside and gathered the letters, wrapping them in a silk scarf Mama had left behind. As I did, I caught my reflection in the window, my face streaked with determination and fear. Mama had spent her life protecting lies that weren't hers. I wouldn't do the same. That night, I packed a small bag and stood in front of the magnolia tree one last time. Its white blossoms glowed under the porch light, whispering in the breeze. I reached out and touched one, feeling the soft petals against my skin. Help me find him, I whispered, and for just a moment, the wind shifted, carrying the faintest scent of candle wax and old letters, almost like an answer. I looked back at the house, where Ruth stood in the doorway, tears shining in her eyes. You sure about this, Liv? I smiled faintly. Mama carried enough silence for all of us. It's time someone spoke. Then I turned toward the road and walked into the dawn. The road stretched long and silent beneath the rising Alabama sun. I'd been driving for hours. Just me, the hum of the tires, and the weight of those letters sitting in the passenger seat beside me. Every mile took me deeper into land that felt both foreign and familiar. The fields rolled out like memories, dotted with old barns and church steeples. Somewhere down this road, a man named Daniel Hayes, my mother's brother, might still be breathing. I stopped at a gas station outside Meridian, Mississippi, the kind of place that hadn't changed in 40 years. Faded sign, screen door creaking, the smell of oil and coffee mingling in the air. I walked in, and behind the counter sat an older black man with a weathered face and a soft smile. Morning, baby. You looking for something? Maybe, I said, setting my wallet down. You ever know a man named Daniel Hayes? Worked construction, maybe. Back in the 70s or 80s, the man froze mid-motion, the change jingling in his hand. Daniel Hayes, he repeated slowly, like tasting an old name. Ain't heard that one in a long while. Why you asking? He's family, I said quietly. I think he's my uncle. The man studied me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing like he was tracing someone else's face through mine. Well, I'll be, he murmured finally. You got Essie's eyes. You her granddaughter, ain't you? The air caught in my throat. You knew my grandma? Knew her? Everybody in Meridian knew Essie. Sweet woman. Strong, too. Her boy Daniel used to come by here every Sunday with a Bible in one hand and a sketchbook in the other. Said he was going to build houses for folks who couldn't afford them. And one day, he stopped coming. My chest tightened. Did he leave town? Nah, he said softly. He stayed. Built himself a little place out by the bayou. Folks said he didn't talk much after that. Kept to himself, worked, prayed. Think he's still out there, though. House on Riverbend Road. I thanked him and stepped outside. The morning light burned brighter now, gold spilling over the edges of the clouds. Riverbend Road wasn't far, 20 minutes maybe. My palms were slick with sweat by the time I turned down the narrow dirt path lined with cypress trees. At the end stood a small wooden cabin. Wind chimes clinked softly in the breeze. Smoke drifted from the chimney. My heart hammered. I sat in the car for a long minute before finally stepping out. The porch creaked under my feet as I climbed the steps. My hand hovered over the door. Then I knocked. It opened slowly, revealing an older man, dark brown skin, gray beard trimmed close, eyes sharp but gentle. He wore a denim shirt rolled at the sleeves, and though his shoulders were stooped, his presence filled the doorway. Yes, his voice was deep, calm. Are you Daniel Hayes? He blinked. The name seemed to startle him. Depends who's asking. My name is Olivia. My mama was Lorraine Hayes. Silence, long and heavy. Then his breath caught like a man punched in the gut. Lorraine. He leaned against the frame, closing his eyes. Lord have mercy. I swallowed hard. She passed, but before she did, she left letters. One's from Grandma Essie. That's how I found you. He turned away, gripping the edge of the door. His voice cracked. I thought she hated me. She never even knew you existed. They told her you ran away. He looked at me then, eyes wet, voice trembling. They took my name out the house, Liv, like I never lived. But I never stopped thinking about her. Every birthday, every Christmas, I'd drive by that old porch and watch from the road. The words shattered something inside me. I reached into my bag, pulling out the stack of letters wrapped in silk. I think these belong to you. He took them slowly, hands shaking, and sank into a porch chair. Essie's handwriting, he whispered. I ain't seen it in 50 years. He looked up at me, tears glistening. You came all this way for a ghost story. No, I said softly. I came to bring you home. He stared at me for a long time, then smiled faintly through his tears. You got your mama's heart, girl. Fire and gentleness all tangled up. The magnolia-scented breeze swept across us, rustling the letters in his lap. I could feel Mama's spirit somewhere between us, not haunting anymore, but resting. As Daniel opened the first letter, the past began to breathe again. The next morning, sunlight poured through the thin lace curtains of Daniel's cabin. I hadn't slept much, not from fear, but from the flood of stories, names, and truths that had spilled out the night before. Daniel and I had sat by the fireplace until nearly dawn, the crackling wood stitching together 50 years of silence. Now I stood on the porch, coffee mug warm in my hands, breathing in the sweet air that smelt like rain and pine. I could see him through the window, bent over the kitchen table, carefully unfolding another one of Grandma Essie's letters. Every few minutes, he'd pause to rub his face or whisper a quiet, Lord, before continuing. There was a peace in his grief, the kind that comes when the truth finally stops hiding. When he came outside, he carried one of the letters in his weathered hand. This one's from 1974, he said softly, sitting down beside me. Mama wrote it the year after I left. He passed it to me, and I read aloud. Daniel, if the Lord ever brings you back to this earth, I hope you remember that love don't die. It just changes its name. One day, this family will have to face what we buried, and I pray it's you who helps dig it up, not for revenge, but for peace. The words trembled in my throat. I looked up at him, and he smiled faintly through tears. I think she knew you'd come, he said. She always believed somebody would set it right. We sat there quietly listening to the creak of the rocking chairs and the hum of cicadas, the same rhythm that had filled Grandma's porch decades ago. It lived here too, different porch, same heartbeat. After breakfast, Daniel showed me around his land, small garden out back, a weathered swing tied to a pecan tree, and the remains of an old shed where he used to keep his tools. Built most of this myself, he said proudly. Didn't have much, but I made it enough, just like Grandma, I said. He chuckled. Guess we all got a little of her stubborn grace. Later, he pulled out a wooden box from under his bed, carved with initials E.H., and inside were sketches, dozens of them, houses, porches, faces. He handed me one. It was a pencil drawing of a little girl sitting on the steps of a house I recognized. Ours. That's Mama, I whispered. Drew it the last time I saw her. She was 6. Essie says she'd gone inside to get lemonade. I waited all afternoon, but she never came back. Next thing I knew, I was told to leave and never return. My chest tightened. Why would she send you away? His face softened. There were things You don't understand yet, Liv. Pain runs deep in our family, pride deeper still. Essie loved hard, but she feared the church folks more than she trusted her own heart. He looked out over the trees, voice low. When she found out I was seeing a white girl from Meridian, she lost her mind. Said I was bringing shame on the Hayes name. I left that night and never went back. The words hung heavy between us, not with anger, but sorrow. I saw how much he still loved her. Even after all that, I reached over and placed my hand on his. Maybe the curse ends with us, I said. He nodded slowly. Maybe it does. We spent the afternoon painting the old fence, him on one side, me on the other, laughter breaking through the quiet. For the first time in days, I felt light. Before sunset, he said, there's a storm coming tonight. I can feel it in my bones. Might be good to sit it out here. These walls been through worse. So I stayed. And that night, as thunder rolled over the hills, we sat again by the fire. He looked at me. The storm passed quietly in the night, leaving behind a world rinsed clean. When I stepped outside the next morning, the air was soft and new. The porch boards still damp, the scent of wet earth rising like memory. The sky stretched pale blue over the bayou, sunlight dripping through the trees. Daniel joined me not long after, coffee steaming in his hand. He wore his work shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and for the first time since I'd met him, there was no trace of sadness on his face, just calm. I found one more letter, he said, voice barely above a whisper. It was tucked under the floorboard right by the hearth. Must have slipped through over the years. He handed it to me carefully, as if it might crumble. The paper was yellowed, edges soft, handwriting still steady and elegant. Grandma Essie's. I unfolded it slowly, my fingers trembling, and began to read aloud. My children, if this letter finds its way to your hands, it means time has done what pride would not. It's healed enough for truth to live again. I was wrong to hide you from one another. I was wrong to let fear write our story. I thought I was protecting you from a world that wouldn't understand our kind of love. Mixed, imperfect, too tender for small minds. But in doing so, I built the same walls I pray you'd never live behind. If there's a porch left standing, let it be one where you can sit together. Let it be the porch that holds laughter instead of secrets. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Daniel's hand found my shoulder, steady, rough, real. He smiled faintly. Well, Mama, looks like we finally made it. We sat there a long time, the two of us, letting silence do what words couldn't. Around us, the world stirred back to life. Birds calling from the trees, the rustle of magnolia leaves, a soft wind carrying the smell of rain and old wood. After breakfast, we drove to the family home. The one I'd inherited, the one where this whole story began. The boards creaked beneath our feet as we stepped onto that familiar porch. This place still got a heartbeat, Daniel said, tapping one of the posts. I nodded. It's been waiting for us. Together, we pried up the last of the loose floorboards. Daniel reached in and pulled out a small tin box, rusted shut, but when we forced it open, inside were photographs, ribbons, and one last note written in my mother's handwriting. Liv, if you ever find this, know that Grandma did her best with the pieces she had. Forgive her. Forgive me. The women in our family carry storms, but we also carry sun. Don't let the world turn your love into fear. By the time I finished reading, Daniel was crying, soft, deep sobs that came from somewhere years behind him. I leaned into him and we cried together. When the tears ran out, I stood and looked around the porch, the same porch that had hidden generations of shame, now filled with the scent of morning and the sound of two people choosing peace. I'm going to rebuild this place, not like it was, but how it should have been, with space for everyone. He nodded slowly. Then it'll finally be home. That afternoon, neighbors came by. Miss Laverne from down the road, old Mr. Harris with his cane, folks who'd known Grandma, who'd whispered stories about her strength and her temper. They stood in the yard watching Daniel and me side by side, the past made visible. By evening, I painted a sign for the porch. the house that forgiveness built. When the sun dipped low, Daniel and I sat on the steps, sharing sweet tea in silence. Fireflies flickered in the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a gospel song floated faintly through the air, the kind Grandma used to hum when she thought no one was listening. I thought about everything we lost, everything we gained, and how love, once buried, always finds its way to the light. I turned to Daniel and said softly, "You know, I think she'd be proud." He smiled, eyes glistening. "She is, and so is your mama." As the last light faded from the porch, I whispered a quiet thank you, not to the wind or the sky, but to the women who came before me. Because forgiveness, I realize, isn't about forgetting. It's about giving your heart somewhere new to rest. And for the first time, mine was home.